Hello, everyone. It's Peter Dennis here again. Today, my guest is Barbara With, and Barbara is a very multifaceted individual. She lives on a small island, Madeline Island, out in Lake Superior, Wisconsin, and she is an award-winning author. She's a composer, a musician, a performer, a workshop facilitator, a world peace activist, and the founder of Conflict Revolution. Barbara, welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me. And hello, everyone.
Barbara, I guess most of our audience is maybe beginning to get the idea now that channelers come from everywhere, every walk of life. Actually, in the introduction, I didn't mention you were a channeler and that channeling impacts a good bit of what you do here. But in any event, I guess our audience would be, I think, interested in knowing about your background, where you've come from, and I've already listed some of the things you do, but yeah, just tell us a little about you growing up and becoming the person you are today.
Well, I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I, from a very, very young age, took to music. So I started teaching myself piano when I was 5, and my mother was the church choir director. So I was singing in the choir when I was 6, and I started writing music when I was about 12. So by the time I got out of high school, I had 2 solid sets of original material I'd been playing through high school at parties, and I went right out on the road as a singer. And it was 1972, so the music at the time was singer-songwriter. And my whole life, all I ever wanted to do was be a rock star. And I dedicated my entire life to that pursuit. And during that time, I was visiting my friend Mike, had a mother, Eunice, who was a channel. And this is back when I'm in high school. So it's like the 70s, early 70s. And we didn't call her a channel. And I just went to her because I was curious. I wasn't looking for a psychic. And I ended up sort of studying with her for a good decade where I'd get readings and I'd write them down. That was back before we even had recording devices. That's how old that is. So, and then I would study what she said versus what happened versus what I thought was going to happen. And that was sort of my beginning training of being a psychic. Mm-hmm. And I always say that the writing of music is what set me up to eventually become a channel, because it's the same process. You go into nothing, you hear, and you pull stuff out. And when I started to channel, my whole life changed to a whole different direction. I tried to stay with music, but things started to build as I continued to be a psychic channel.
Yeah, you make a good point in that channeling takes various forms. I know when I'm writing and sometimes even speaking, the words are just flowing and I know that's not me or I'm getting help. And I've always noticed people like Paul Anka, Gordon Lightfoot, real good songwriters. They're channeling, in my opinion.
I heard Brian Greene, one of the world's premier string theorists, a scientist, talk about how he did math, this process of it. And I thought, that's channeling. That's exactly the process I use. So,
yeah. Well, once you started becoming an oral channeler, I imagine your life shifted a little bit. Is that the case?
It did, indeed. And remember now, I was always counterculture. So I was always a musician who didn't make a lot of money, but had pursued my passion. And I was getting a lot of accolades to that. But in 1993, I thought, what would happen if I channeled for more than one person at a time? Because my mentor said she was an antenna and she was picking up my higher power and talking back to my human mind. And that's all it was. It wasn't spirits or angels or anything. So this voice of we that comes out was, in my head, it was whoever I'm channeling for and me. So I thought, well, wait a minute, what would happen if there were more people? And so I tried to put together a group, and none of the people in my circle were interested. And suddenly to my door one day, a referral came, Teresa McMillan, and then she sent 6 of her girlfriends, and then she sent her best friend, Kimberly Phelps. And Kimberly and Teresa just ignited. And Kimberly actually transcribed her reading and would call me and say, "What does this mean? What does this mean?" Nobody of all my clientele had ever been that interested. So it was the same time I was driving down the highway thinking, "Oh, here's my group." They
Yeah.
were saying to themselves, "Hey, we should get the girls together and see if Barbara will come over." So that's how the group channeling started. And we did our first group in 1993, December 1993. And yes, my whole life, little did I know where I was going, what mission I was on. And they couldn't have told me because A, wouldn't have believed them. And then B said, no, no, I'm going to be a rock star. So it's been a wild ride. It really has.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned groups, and a number of people start out channeling with a single individual. It might be their higher self, a guide, or some being that isn't too far removed from a human being. But then often they use the term we. And when you probe into what's going on here, yeah, they're speaking on behalf of a collective or a group. And sometimes these groups are like 4 or 6 individuals. Sometimes they're like thousands or, vast numbers. Now, you channel Albert Einstein, and he's probably a case in point. Albert uses we from time to time, and my understanding is he travels with a group, probably pretty scientifically minded group. Um, I know there are certain civilizations like the Arcturians, for example, who are very technologically advanced. He could have some of those in his group, I'm not sure. That maybe we'll find out in a few minutes. How long have you been channeling Albert?
I first met Albert Einstein in 1998, and we had just put out our first book, Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, Talking with the Angels. And that's who, when the girls asked in channeling, "Who are you?" That's who they said, "You can call us angels."
Mm.
And they said, "We are here. We have a theory about how humans can resolve conflict first inside themselves in this special way we want to tell you that will have an impact on world peace. World peace will be the byproduct. So you're not going right at world peace. You're going
Mm-hmm.
first to resolve these and they needed humans to test it on.
Yeah.
And here was the 3 of us. So we had been, and that's how Conflict Revolution was born, was our work on our conflicts, applying what these angels had been instructing us because they needed to test it, I thought. So when the book came out, and I had an invitation from a magazine in London to do an afterlife interview with Princess Diana. And that's a whole long story. But in that process, we discovered, me and my literary agent and I, that there were other famous dead people who wanted to talk to us. I'd never done anything like this. Just imagine going up to Diana's spirit and saying, "Do you want to talk?" And her going, "Yes." And so we got to John Kennedy. Interesting interview. We're about to find out what really happened, I think. But he said, "This book is not your idea. We are a party of 12 who have been working in the afterlife with you to help facilitate world peace. And we will tell you who the next interviewees will be." And I was like, great, because whatever. And when Albert Einstein came up and I channeled him, I spoke. When I did Diana, I typed everything. But when I did him, I closed my eyes and I spoke. It was the voice of every single channel I had ever done. And it shocked me to the core because, I always say, if your grandma who passed away and you loved her and you knew her, if some spirit came to try to pretend to be your grandma, you would know.
Mm-hmm.
No, you just would know there's a thing. I knew that voice. In fact, it was the voice of when I started automatic writing in 1987. So it was really profound on a personal level to have to digest that, okay, I'm not an antenna. Okay, they're not really angels. Or are they? Or And now it's a party with these famous dead people. Now, remember, Albert Einstein, you said he's probably hanging out with the scientists. Well, of course, they're hanging out with him. But when he passed away, his two biggest issues in his real life was that unified field theory that he didn't ever get to, and how to bring peace.
Mm-hmm.
So his mission, as far as I can see through all these years of being with him, is yeah, he wants to influence the scientists. He wants to inspire them to understand from this unified field that he's now delivered through me more science. But more than ever, and I think you'll agree with this, is that yeah, let's find the source of consciousness. Let's get down and figure out how it works. But if we're going to be doing this kind of AI stuff, we have to have a ethical and moral compass inside us, because the power that AI wields is so profound. And so I think his message is not just let's evolve science, but how do we instill these natural, moral, ethical, self-responsibility patterns in humans so that we don't have to go to war.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a pretty complex party. It's gotten bigger through time too.
Yes. The makings of a book, very likely. It would take that many pages just to explain some of the concepts that you just touched on. Can you bring them in now, and so that I can have a little chat with them?
Sure.
Yeah,
Let's we will command that only the most divine light shine down upon you at this time, and the greatest good be present here. It is our pleasure to be present and accountable for you today. We are here to open up the channel, and please feel free to inquire where you would like to know.
Well, thank you first for being here and for that invitation. It is Albert that I'm speaking with?
Yes.
Yes. Well, Albert, I guess the first question on everybody's mind is, what are you doing here, channeling through Barbara? What is your purpose in doing this?
The purpose in coming back and establishing this communication is multiple layers. One is when I left the planet with the burning question of how do we prevent humanity from going extinct by its own hand, and having been someone who was involved in science at a time when there was such revolutionary change coming through me, but also that science was being used to create bigger and bigger weapons of war.
Mm-hmm.
And my mission here is to inspire humanity to, first of all, understand the depths of their energy and the kind of dominion that they can have over their own domain, with the intention to help evolve the entire human species. And so in this case, we are not necessarily just focused in science. We are focused at kitchen table inspiration for ordinary people who all have extraordinary powers that they do not understand. And it's our intention to help bring that understanding to the forefront and help humanity thrive.
Mm-hmm. Now, you undoubtedly heard Barbara and me chatting a little, and we're speculating that you are probably at this time with a group of other individuals who perhaps have a science background. Can you tell us a little about who it is that you are with? And I guess just give us a feeling for what their contribution might be.
When I passed, I discovered the world of afterlife, which was absolutely fascinating and also provided the answers to the questions that I had been plagued with in life. not only on a scientific level, but on the mechanism of how the human psyche works. Because the dismantling of the human psyche and the reconstruction of a regenerative operating system is the process that is part of evolution, and it's part of what's uplifting humanity. So when I passed away, I gravitated towards those who I had been in life with. And at some point, I found myself in a situation where I came upon a group of three souls. One was a very disheveled, dark, clearly a soul who was in his own hell. One was a gentleman who was taking copious notes. And the third was an individual who, from the distance when I first saw, was sort of all aglow. And when I focused in on who these souls were, it was Jesus, who was administering to Adolf Hitler, and Sigmund Freud was documenting what was being said. And this was the beginning of the coagulation of what we call the party of 12, because there is a power in the structure of a 12 piece structure. And a little later on, Carl Jung joined the party, and we began to put together a clear understanding of a theory at that time of how to align this psyche of the human to compassion. And with that, we understood that it wasn't just science we had to influence, it was every level of culture. And so as different people passed and came to observe what was going on in this energy that I was the center of, we began to attract far more than just 12, but we picked 12 to be the first to articulate our ideas of how to bring peace to the world, of how to save the planet from every different aspect, from publishing to sexuality to peace to culture. And after that, after we finished our project, and Barbara did indeed publish the book Party of 12, the Afterlife Interviews, then our gathering started to pick up steam. And now it is a huge, huge arena of souls who have come here to lend their energy and their souls to help promote this direction of peace and prosperity.
That number 12 caught my attention. My understanding is Jesus surrounded himself with 12 apostles, and that got the momentum going for Christianity and some of the distortions that followed. Is there something particular about the number 12?
Well, if you study the information that we have brought forth about the unified field and the map of human consciousness and our scientific quantifiable definition of compassion as the fifth fundamental force of the universe, you understand that when you achieve this triangular configuration within what we call your compilation of consciousness, so you have this bit of consciousness that surrounds all of the mathematics that are going to be your world in the source. And when we get to 3, there is an activation. It's like a sacred geometry that puts forces in motion. And so there is a kind of a structure where you have 4 figures, 4 structures of 3 working together that creates the, you might call it the generator of being a conscious human, that there is a process with which you are generating this experience of reality, and it comes through these 12-sided, 12 aspects, 12 pieces of this structure that activate and ignite.
That would probably require at least a book to explain. Um, how do you see yourselves going about explaining some of these concepts to humanity? And I suppose you don't have to explain them all. What you're aiming for, if I understand it correctly, is world peace, but also laying in some advances in technology. How do you see yourselves going about, or what steps do you see yourselves taking?
Well, we began by making it a an everyday conversation. We did not come here to focus just on science and the answers that science is looking for. What we came was to focus on one person at a time and the individual psyche and what is going on in the psyche and how to realign the psyche to this flow of compassion that we have brought forth through Barbara. And so our idea is that we go to the scientists and we help scientists align to compassion so that they are tapped into the deepest, fullest, richest creative force that they have. And then they can begin to channel all of that science that they have been charged with doing by coming here. We do that with the religious leaders. They too clear their own psyche and they align themselves to compassion to be the best leaders that they can be within that. We talk about education. We can apply this to personal relationships, psychology. It's all about inspiring humans to become those creative channels and then channel that for themselves, to find the answers for themselves. And that is the most exciting work that we can think of doing.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about the steps you would take to get the ball rolling with the scientists, church leaders, and that sort of crowd, you might say.
Well, our experience is that our job is to show you. Our job is to present to you the unified field theory, the maps of human consciousness, explain the scientific definition of compassion, teach you how to understand conflict revolution, where you master your own domain, which is basically what we call the three human dimensions of emotion, intellect, and intuition. So we feel as if once we show this to you, you can choose to pursue our actual process, our actual maps. But what we feel and what we see happening, especially now that humans are so open and wanting to know this, what we see is a opening that once you see the truth, once you feel the truth, you may not be able to articulate it, you may not be able to explain it, you may not be able to understand it, but your body resonates with that truth. And there's a liberation in that because humans are suffering so under the weight of this heavy intellect that is crowding out that sacred intuitive and preventing those deep, powerful emotions from moving through. So we are very excited that this process that we have brought forth, that we've tested for decades, that is in fact a miraculous process of regeneration, is on every level. It can be injected on any level or at every level, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it.
I'm still a little in the dark as to how you would, let's say, introduce these concepts to the scientific community. Would certain scientists all of a sudden be capable of channeling? Do you intend to create videos and send them as email attachments? What steps will you take to get the science to, or the scientists to respond to what you're saying?
We have been on a long journey, and our work with Barbara has, as we said, stretched through decades. And in that process, there are steps to take that build upon each other. So, for example, the person that Barbara is now is not the person she was in 1993 when she started channeling. She would not have been psychologically prepared to be able to carry this information, to be able to do it with the veracity and the clarity that she can today in 2025. But she had to go through that, and part of that process was bringing the work to the scientists that were accessible. She had several amateur science teachers, scientists who were drawn up by this incredible theory. But the idea now that everything is ready and coming out, we are going to be presenting this, Barbara as the presenter of the unified field. We have a master class that is about to be able to be downloaded by anyone in the world to be able to walk through the unified field, the map of human consciousness, the steps of compassion is the fifth fundamental force. And then how do you interpret all of that complexity down to a very basic daily process that allows you to master your domain while you're moving through the world. So we're not so concerned that all we do is focus on the scientists, but the scientists will hear this, they will be exposed to it, and as they do, they will be able to recognize certain things within their work. They'll be able to have a better clarity of, oh, we've been going on this direction. Maybe we should go on this direction as they listen to their intuition. That is the part of them that is feeding them all that information anyway.
Mhm. So you put this information out for the general public with the idea that some scientists will be prompted perhaps to access that information. I can imagine that as we humans do get prompted quite often to engage in different activities, that there's going to be a few taps on the shoulder to some of these scientists to take a look at perhaps the YouTube videos or whatever.
Yes,
Okay.
and we work with them behind the scenes now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we should wrap up shortly, but I'm wondering if at this time you might have a message that you would like to get to, let's say, all of humanity.
Well, our message has been consistently focused on the idea that world peace begins within each individual. And oftentimes humans are confused as to what that means. You have so little seeming control over what happens outside you, but you are completely the master of your inner world. And when you learn that, when you meet yourself and you understand where your power lies and where your power doesn't lie, this is when regeneration begins to take place. So do not underestimate how important it is for you as an individual to do that hard work, to get to know yourself, to get to master what are you thinking, what are you feeling, what is your intuition telling you, and get to know yourself in this incredibly powerful new way. And you'll find regeneration happening on every level, whether it be politics, whether it be science, whether it be the family or the community. When you turn in and take personal responsibility with compassion, that is the key to moving forward.
Well, thank you very much for that, Albert. I appreciate the message, and I guess on the one hand, the simplicity of it, on the other, the complexity of it. Would you recommend meditation as a means for humans to kind of tune into what's going on within themselves?
Yes, absolutely. And in a very simple structure, think of these three human dimensions as three spiritual organs. So when you meditate, what you're doing is in the intellect, in your brain. This is where all of the cacophony of self talk and information and judgments, when you meditate, you quiet that mind, and that allows the energy of intuition, which is in your heart and is fueled by emotion, which is in your solar plexus. It gives you space and time to hear what intuition, which is the voice of compassion, telling you the next most advantageous step to take for the good of the whole situation in that moment, that beautiful voice of God that's never going to leave you wrong. But what happens is when intellect gets overcrowded, you miss it. You miss those messages. And ego is that place that holds the power of free will. So ego has the power to say no to the voice of God within you. So meditation is very, very helpful to relax that organ. But also remember emotion. Emotion is the powerful force of the manifestation of everything that's in the physical world. And you have to be able to move it all through your body, not just the joyful, comfortable parts, but we have to find ways to process and release the anger and the depression and the anxiety without allowing them to hit intellect and form ideas that then get projected onto the world around you. So feeling and breathing your emotions, reducing the fluctuations of thinking, and deep listening for intuition is the way to align to compassion.
Well, thank you very much for that, Albert. And thank you for being here today. And I'm sure we're going to be crossing paths again, but I wish you every success in what you're doing and many blessings to you and to your group. Bye for now.
Thank you, and to you as well.
And Barbara, you just come back in your own time. Take your time. Oh, you're coming back quickly. How are you feeling after that? How do you feel when this is going on?
I feel like it's me. It feels like me talking, but because it's so deep and profound and spontaneous and where it goes, and I don't know what's coming next, I know it's not. But for someone who's been channeling since 1987, I describe it as I'm kind of a marathon runner who just went out for a mile and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel energized or drained, anything like that, or just business as usual?
It's always a different feeling of awareness. You know, I have my eyes closed. You see, I have my eyes closed, and they're talking through me, and I'm listening, and I'm being aware that I'm channeling all this complex. Like, so when I come out, it's clear that that was a heightened state of understanding. So that everything's a little more just, hard three-dimensional than that. But it really isn't a lot for me. I think I live in that world a lot, like consciously aware that I'm surrounded by this party, and they don't hide themselves from me. So
Excellent. Well, we should wrap up, Barbara, but before I do, how is it best for people to get in touch with you?
if you go to barbarawith.com, and that's with like the preposition, BARBARAWITH. And that has everything that you'd ever want to know. My readings are there. It's if you don't get there for any reason, there's some construction going on with it, but I have downloadable courses, and I do a how to channel class every month. I start a new how to channel class. I work in small groups to help people do this. And you want to email me, you can go at barbara@barbarawith.com, and I will be there.
Good. And I'll put that at the end of this video on a little screen as well. Well, Barbara, thank you very much for doing this and bringing Albert in. Just a fascinating character. And I would say buckle up. It's going to be exciting.
It is. Well, thank you, Peter, so much.
You're very welcome. And we'll be in touch. And to the audience, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. And there's lots more coming. Bye for now.